So there's a woman at my church, and anytime you ask her if she can do you a favor or do a service for you, her answer is usually, "Sure, I live to serve," and it seems to be her mantra. And it's been inspiring to me, so I've kind of adopted it as my own mantra because I love serving other people. And it's actually one of the reasons why I started doing this channel in the first place, was to help my fellow authors, especially the self-published authors, get their work more out there, get more recognition and more eyes on their work. Especially, there are so many books that I feel like they're so good, that they should be talked about a lot more than what they are, and they should be definitely getting a lot more recognition than what they are. And when I first heard about Every Ounce of Courage, I was so excited that this book, when I did the 100 book challenge and announced that, and this book came up, every book that got recommended, as it was getting recommended, and I was adding it to the list and adding it to the wheel, I was going through and reading what the books were about. And this one came up, and it was one I was really excited, and I was really hoping that it would get chosen. And when it got chosen, at first I didn't realize which book it was because I didn't have the covers in front of me. But then when I went through and started purchasing the 100 books and I got to this book, I was like, oh yeah, that book! And I was so excited about getting this book because it sounded so interesting. I like my fiction books, don't get me wrong. I like the fantasies, I like the adventure books and whatnot. But there is something very special about the nonfiction books, especially when you're talking about biographies about a certain specific people, because it gives you a chance to learn about people and events that you otherwise wouldn't have known about. Like, we are all familiar with what World War II was and everything, but what we don't really have a lot of, you have to go and search if you want the stories of those things, because even in history class, you learn about World War II as a whole, and you don't really learn too much about individual people in history class, or at least my history classes didn't teach about individual people, except for these are the bad guys, these are the good guys, this is who we're rooting for and whatnot. But as different stories from World War II come out, different individual stories about different individuals, it gives you a more tight-framed picture of World War II in this area. And for us in America, most of our World War II knowledge focuses in on what was going on in Germany. And this is the first time that I'm actually reading a story about something that how the World War II affected the Philippines. And so this story was written by Elizabeth Ann Besa-Quirino, and it's about her mother. And Elizabeth didn't really know a lot of what happened in World War II with her mother and what her mother did, because her mom and her uncle never really talked about it much. And when they did talk about it, especially her mother, there was so much that they held back from her that they just didn't want to reveal. Lulu, Elizabeth's mother, actually embodies that phrase of "I live to serve," and she had started serving as young as 5 when her father died Christmas morning when she was 5 years old, leaving her alone with her mother, her 2 toddler brothers, and an unborn baby on the way. And obviously her mother was grief-stricken at losing her husband, and the two boys were not quite old enough to understand the implications of Daddy's not coming home anymore. But Lulu was old enough to understand, and so she stepped up kind of as a second mother to her little brothers to help her mom raise these two toddlers, and then the baby Ponciano Jr., who came along later after he was born. And so almost as soon as she was able to take responsibility, she did. And at 5 years old, she was helping her mom with her brothers. Even when her father was alive, her job was to keep her brothers out of mischief and keep them from getting into the Christmas presents or playing with the tree while Mom was cooking. And she took that responsibility seriously. She loved being a big sister. As she got older, she grew up as a socialite, and she got to the age of 19 where she was introduced to societal circles, and she started going into these parties and these dances and these social events, and she got into the clubs and whatnot. And when she was charged with setting up events herself, she started turning them into charitable events. She figured, I have the advantage and the opportunity to help people. Why wouldn't I help people? So she started doing charitable work and started working with these different charities across her homeland. And when World War II broke out, that continued. She started helping out with the Red Cross. She started getting food donations for the POWs. And then one night, while sitting at home with her mom and her two younger brothers, the oldest of the three and the youngest of the three, as well as her middle brother's wife, they were listening to the radio, and they hear a broadcast. Her brother's unit had been severely attacked. Many of them had died at the hands of the Japanese, and what was left was captured. And with no hesitation, her mother obviously is distraught by this news, and without hesitation and without any earned conviction, Lulu makes a promise to her mother: I will find Willie. We will find Willie. Don't worry, we will find him. She has no idea how to go about finding him, has no idea the likelihood of her being able to find him, but she is willing to make this promise to her mother. And she starts helping out with the POWs even more. She befriends the Japanese, getting them to be convinced of her allyship, so much so that they very rarely question or suspect any traitorous intent from her. They honestly believe that she is their friend and that she's trying to help them, and they allow her into these POW camps to give food to the prisoners and to talk to the high commanders. And as she's going through these different POW camps, she's kind of scanning around, looking to see if anybody looks familiar to her. And in one camp, she's led to the high commander, and she kind of scans the room, and over in a corner, she sees a familiar-looking young man who is emaciated from malaria, and recognizes him to be her brother. And rather than throwing herself at him and being, "Oh my gosh, I found you, I'm so happy you're alive," she ignores him and pretends that she knows nothing of these soldiers and has no connection with them. And she continues on her way to talk to the high commander, and eventually gets him to agree not only to allow her to bring food and provisions to the POWs, but also she helps with the negotiations of getting the sick ones released. And to be released, the Japanese give them a condition. The sick ones can go free as long as they sign an oath stating that they will never take up arms against the Japanese again. And those stricken with the malaria and very sick and whatnot, including Willie, sign the paper willingly, like, yes, we will sign the paper, and they go free. And Willie, like many of his compatriots, when they are healed and healthy again, they immediately take up arms with the guerrillas and to fight against the Japanese, because as Willie, who is a man of his word and a man of honor, says, an oath made under duress is not valid. So with clean consciences, these men take up arms with the guerrillas. And one of my favorite statements in this book is where Elizabeth says, the Japanese did not respect the Filipinos as soldiers, but they would learn to fear them as guerrillas. And I've spoken before about fictional writers respecting their characters enough to take the time with each of their characters. And Elizabeth is no less considerate to the people that she talks about in this book. Not only does she take the time to really help you understand what kind of a person her mother was, but she takes the time to tell you about each of her uncles, Bobby, Willie, and Ponzi. She takes the time to tell you about her Aunt Helen and about her godmother. She takes the time to tell you about a little bit about Rob Dow, the man who contacted her at midnight one night asking her if she was the daughter of Lulu Reyes. And when she says, yes, I am the daughter of Lulu Reyes, he tells her, you don't know me, but your mother saved my life. Robert Dow was in the same concentration camp as her brother Willie. Not at the same time, but they were interned there at some point. But even so, she didn't stop once she found her brother. Once she found her brother, she recognized that all these men were somebody's lost son, somebody's lost brother. They didn't know where they were, whether they were alive, whether they were well cared for, and obviously they weren't, because they were practically stacked on top of each other. And she made a heightened effort to get relief items to these POWs. There were certain items that she was allowed to bring them, different types of foods, basic medical equipment or whatever, but there was a lot she was not allowed to bring in. And she figured, well, if I'm not allowed to bring it in, then I'll sneak it in. And she did. There were priests that were interned with these POWs, and the priests were allowed to hold mass for the Catholics in these POW compounds. And so she would sneak in malaria pills to the priest, who would give them to the POWs suffering from malaria as part of their communion. And she got so friendly and had the Japanese believing so much in her friendliness towards them that oftentimes they gave her, sometimes inadvertently, highly classified information that she then took and gave to the Filipino and American armies to help turn the tides of the war in the favor of liberating the Filipino people from the Japanese invasion. There were times when sometimes all she did was run on faith, like literally running on faith, when Manila was being invaded and bombed by the Japanese. Her and her family, they had ideas of where they were going to go and take refuge, and those places, for one reason or another, they couldn't get to. Either they were turned away because of bombings, like there's smoke that they couldn't see where they were going, so they kept bypassing the places that they thought they would go to get safety, and instead ended up in a completely different part of Manila that they hadn't intended to be. And at one point, she is sitting there praying for the safety of her family, for the safety of her friends, and for the safety of innocence, that innocence would be granted aid that they needed. And as they're running, they come across 3 innocents, 3 orphan children between the ages of, I believe, 2 and 5, whose parents had died, And they're standing out here in the middle of the street, out in the open, ready to be stabbed or shot by Japanese armies. And I'm not joking about that. They came across two of their friends who told them that their mother was gunned down, and when they saw that the 2-year-old in her arms was still alive, the Japanese bayoneted the 2-year-old to death to kill it. These 3 children were not going to survive on their own, and Lulu would not leave them and insisted on taking them with their family. So you have this woman with her 3 brothers, her mother, and her sister-in-law, and now 3 children in tow. This large group that should have been so easy to see and take apart with by the Japanese, and somehow they managed to get to a safe place, all intact. And by the time that the American troops come in and push the Japanese out and liberate the Philippines, Manila is decimated. And she says that Lulu and her family spent over a year in refugee camps while their home was being rebuilt and their hometown was being rebuilt, while Manila itself was being rebuilt and refurbished so that people could live there again. And it didn't even cross Lulu's mind to ever turn these 3 orphans over to any kind of government or church or anything. She kept them with her. She became overnight a single mother of 3 because she wouldn't let these children just be sent off somewhere or separated. And she raised them to adulthood. She married late in life, had 2 children, Elizabeth and her little sister Isabel, and Willie, her brother, who she went through hell and back with. Obviously the 2 of them created a bond that she could never have with her other 2 brothers, who were not as embedded in the war as much as Lulu and Willie were. But that didn't mean she loved her brothers any less. She just had a different relationship with them than she did with Willie, and confessed at one point to Elizabeth that Willie was her favorite brother. And how could he not be, with what the 2 of them went through together to preserve their family and preserve a future for not only their future kids, if they had any, but the future generations of Manila. And Willie gave up so much to protect his country and his homeland for the people he loved and the people that would come after him, that by the time that he and his wife settled down and were able to rest after the war, they remained childless for the rest of their lives. And as a result, he spoiled the only child that was allowed him, his niece, Elizabeth. And Lulu, understandably, protested very lightly. Like, she was never serious. You're going to spoil her. I don't want her to get used to it. But she was never too firm about that. And she allowed her brother to spoil her daughter until his last days. I believe Elizabeth said she was just shy of 5 years old when her uncle passed away. She lost the next uncle, Bobby, when she was 6. And then she at least got to know her uncle Ponciano and knew him up to adulthood before he himself passed away. But as she's going through all of this, Elizabeth she didn't know the full scope of everything that her mother and her uncle had gone through and what kind of a person her mom was. She knew that she was a kind person. She knew that she was a serving person. She knew that she was a gentle and loving person. But she just didn't understand until she started doing the research how far that servitude and kindness and love went throughout all of Manila and how many lives her mother touched. She at one point says that when she was young, she kind of snuck into her dad's office because her mom's awards were never displayed anywhere. And her mom was never braggy about it. She never talked about her accomplishments or her accolades. But one day she went into her father's office, and there was a cabinet behind him, behind his desk, and she opened the cabinet and she saw all these boxes and all these leather folders, and she started looking through them and seeing all of these certificates and all these plaques and all these ribbons, and she earned and all these medals, and she had earned 2 medals of freedom for her work in World War II. And as a small child, she understood, wow, my mom has a lot of awards, but as a child, she's thinking of them in the same way that you would think of as sports awards, that these are something to be proud of and to be displayed. And she once asked her mom, why are these not displayed? And her mom's like, your dad has promised to build me a display case for them. He just hasn't gotten around to it. And it's not that her dad never got around to it. He hired a carpenter, and he asked him to build the display case. But every time he came in to build the display case, the mother's like, oh, you know what? I know we're supposed to build a display case today, but actually my daughter needs a new headboard, or I need a new side table. You know what? I need a sideboard to display to hold more dishes. Could you build that? I need a new dresser. She always had another project that was way more important that he had to build right then, and every time he went to build the display case, she would come up with something else. She, like many veterans, didn't want to display her accolades because that wasn't why she did it. My dad has tons of certificates and medals and awards from his services in the Army, and they never got displayed. We actually found them in a box in a closet up on a shelf one day when we were moving from a house, and I was helping my mom pack the her bedroom up, and I pulled down the box and I pulled it open because I'd seen the box, but I never really knew what was in it. And when I opened it, there's all of Dad's awards and accommodations and medals and whatnot. And I asked my mom, I said, why are these not displayed? And she's like, hey, your dad doesn't want them displayed. That was simple. That was a simple explanation, and I got nothing more from it. As I've gotten older, I've realized that those are just not the kind of things you necessarily display. You might display them after the person has passed away, but the people who serve their country, 9 times out of 10, they don't care about the accolades. They didn't do it for the fame. They didn't do it for the glory. They did it because somebody had to do it. It was the thing that had to be done. And it didn't matter who did it. It wasn't a big deal that they did it. It was just, they don't think they're as incredible as everybody else thinks. And Elizabeth's mom was no different. She was as humble as anybody could possibly be. She didn't think she was very pretty. She didn't think she was very incredible. She just, somebody's son and brother was missing, and I needed to find them. Because somebody had to find them. They had to know where they were. Oh, shush. My dad. Speaking of great parents, my dad's trying to call me. So, I'm going to go ahead and end this here, and I will leave a link down below, because I definitely want to talk to my dad, obviously. I will see you guys in the next video. See you later. Bye.